Hi guys, welcome to the system breakdown of Edson Barboza. Edson Jr. Barboza is a fantastic striker. He is a killer in the ring with a fantastic highlight reel. He probably has one of the best highlight reels in all of UFC. From the jumping knee strike to Beneil Dariush to the turning wheel kick that knocked out, Terry Edom. And in fact, he's got a couple other very heavy wheel kicks that he's landed on people that have really wobbled some knees over the years. Dangerous turning back kicks. He's got 2 leg kick knockouts that you'll hear them talk about a lot, but he's also used that to really break down a lot of other fighters. Everything he throws is dangerous. You can never rule this guy out. And part of that is because, look, he's a Taekwondo black belt with a 25-3 record in Muay Thai as a Brazilian champion. He trains at American Top Team. He's a Ricardo Almeida brown belt in Jiu-Jitsu, which is a Renzo Gracie affiliate. He's got a fantastic resume. He's been doing this for a long time. He's a very tenured fighter. And when you look at especially like his first 10 fights in the UFC, man, he was just a terror. And even now, he's still a scary guy. Is evidenced by fights like the Shane Burgos fight and stuff like that. Very, very dangerous stuff. So I'm excited to present this. I hope you enjoy it and stay tuned. Okay, so let's start by talking about some of like the basics of Edson Barboza. First of all, you're going to hear me talk a lot about the luring principle. And what this principle is I get into range and I draw out attacks to give me the opportunity to counter. And this is a major, major tactic that is used by Edson Barboza, both for him to strike offensively and pick these guys apart, but also to draw out some of his devastating counter strikes. And his counter striking is devastating. And part of it is because he puts 100% power into everything that he throws. From the leg kicks to the turning kicks to his punches, everything he throws is 100% power, and it's very dangerous. And now that he's at 145, it's even more so because he hits so hard for that division. And when you look at like the Shane Burgos fight, where he hits him with this cross, and he takes it, and then it takes a second for it to register that he's unconscious, and he just wobbles back. That just shows how powerful this guy's hands are at that level. But even without that, like his kicking even before was tremendously devastating. So everything he throws to kill this guy. And I really like that philosophy because I come from a background in Taekwondo where it's like one shot, one kill. Everything you throw, you should be trying to finish a fight. And that's what Edson Barboza is looking to do. And it shows by his highlight reel. Now, as far as like his defensive tactics, a lot of it is because, he's going to be in here. He always fights orthodox, always, which is rare for a guy who comes from a traditional background. Most of the time when you look at guys who have a more traditional background, you see a lot of stance switching. He doesn't do that. He's an orthodox fighter, and he keeps his hands up in a high guard. And it works really well for him to manipulate range and to do things like as he enters into range, his hands are up to protect himself, and he's going to bounce out, and he's going to leave these hands up to leave him opportunities to counter. But a lot of this, like I said, is based on the luring principle, where he's going to get in, bounce into range, and draw out a shot so that this guy comes in a very predictable way. This is where you start talking about funneling techniques, and I've talked about this before on my channel. If I can anticipate how this guy's going to attack, it makes it much easier for me to counter, and it takes some of the options out, and it brings it down to a few predictable things. And this is what he does. And we'll talk about this more, countering in more detail, but essentially what he does is he jumps in, and he jumps out, and he knows that for this guy to reach him, he's got to come with straights of some variation. If he throws, the hook punches or stuff like that, or a rounded technique, he's too far away, it gives him time to react to it. So it forces him into a straight technique, which allows him to counter it more easily. It's a very smart tactic. And then if they don't do it, then he can move offensively. So that's really the basis of what he does. And we're going to talk about specifics on that, of course. But the idea is coming in, high guard a lot, bounce in and bounce out. Bounce in, bounce out. Bounce in, bounce out. Lure them into an attack that's predictable so that he can then exploit that and counter it. He is at his most dangerous when you talk about counter striking. His offensive stuff is pretty good too, but really he is at heart a counter striker, and it shows in the way that he fights. And there's some downsides that go with it too, which is what's caused him to have some problems against guys like Justin Gaethje and Khabib. So that being said, we're going to get to the next part and start breaking down some of his offensive tactics. All right, guys, Edson Barboza. You can't talk about Edson Barboza without spending a lot of time on the leg kick game, because this is a thing he is known for. Between 2 KOs based on Mike Lulu and Rafael Oliveira, early on in his career, he had 2 KOs by this. Later on, they still became a very important factor. In fact, when he doesn't do a lot of the leg kicks are the fights that he has the most trouble. And part of that is because when guys go southpaw on him and force the open stance, because he is so fixed on orthodox, It's part of why he has a harder time. He's not as devastating when he starts attacking that inside leg. When he can attack the outside leg with his rear leg, he finishes guys, and he does tremendous damage. And it's not even just like those two guys. You look at like the Gilbert Melendez fight. You look at a lot of his fights where he had very, very strong wrestlers and very strong strikers, and he just chops away at their legs. And you see a lot of guys limping very early on in the fight in the first and second rounds because he just chops away at it. Now, there's a reason that he's so successful. And what I hear guys talk about a lot with Edson Barboza is he's fast and he's powerful, but there are a lot of other guys who are fast and powerful. But why is he so successful when other guys are not? And if you notice, he never puts himself at risk. Like, you never see him running into issues with kicking a check a whole lot. It's very rare that he does. On occasion he does, and you'll see him get some bumps on his shins, but mostly he is very clear at getting easy shots in. But why is he so successful when other guys are not? And I think this is an important distinction to talk about when you talk about Edson Barboza and you talk about implementing this into your own kicking game. So let's talk about two principles, the Opportunism Principle and the Principle Projected Intention. These are the primary things that he uses when he goes offensively with this. Now, you will also see where he punctuates combinations with it, but we're going to talk about that in a moment. To start with, though, the Opportunism Principle is a principle by which you can attack somebody where they cannot attack you. This is part of why he does the bounce in, bounce out. He bounces into range and he bounces out. If they don't follow him, he knows that he has a clear opportunity to attack them. If he's bounced in and bounced out, drawing out the counter shot several times, and this guy has not attacked him, this is his trigger to start going offensive because this guy is less likely to respond in a meaningful way. And it means that from the outside, that leg is the easiest target because he's going to use an active jab in here as well, and he's going to be doing a lot of feinting. We'll talk about that in 1 second in projected intention. But the Opportunism Principle is he's going to be able to strike without putting himself at risk of getting counter strike. So this makes the leg kick a very available target for him. Now, projected intention and feinting is a very important aspect of this game. Projected intention is essentially all of my energy in my fighting is going upward so that when I kick, it's not telegraphed. You don't see it coming. It's entirely the lower side of my body, while the upper side of my body and my movement is coming upward, right? So I'm coming in here, I'm moving in and out, I start threatening a jab, and then bam! I can put everything into this because this guy is convinced that the attack is coming high. If you notice when he attacks with the leg, the reason they don't defend it is his opponents are certain that the punch is coming. They're certain they're about to get attacked up high. And if you notice, he doesn't overuse the leg kick. When he starts using it too much, guys start being able to defend it more, and he has to worry about getting checked. But when he's just moving around, and they're worried about punching, and they're worried about his switch kick and stuff like that, this is when he can really chop away at the leg because his projected intention, he has projected all of his energy upward to convince them that that is an attack that is coming so that when he does the leg kick, using the Opportunism Principle, they can't do anything about it because it's too late. They're too busy thinking about this that they just ignored this. And this is why you have guys, I mean, anybody at the UFC at that level, especially in this day and age, they know how to check kicks. So why is he able to land it when other guys can't? Why is he so successful at getting this and not getting checked really? Almost never. Because of the projected intention principle and because of Opportunism Principle, where they are so distracted by other things that they're not thinking about it. He literally has them convinced that it's not coming. Now, when you add in feinting into this, even more so, because as I start coming into range, you know, he does a lot of stepping and probing jab here, right? He comes in here, occasionally throws some hip feints and stuff like that, so that when he does come, bah, it's very out of the blue. And yes, he has a very fast kick and a very powerful kick. But like I said, he's not the only guy in the UFC or in fighting in general who has that kind of power in his kick. What makes him different is how he sets it up by really kind of using the luring principle to draw them in so he knows they're not as likely to counter because they're not engaging. He's got them in a situation in a box where they can't engage. If they do engage, that's great. He wants to draw them in. But if they don't engage, now he's got them and he could chop away at them. Then, when he projects his energy upward, he had some feinting, and he hits them when they can't do much about it. It's very dangerous. This is how he gets guys. Now, the other way he'll get the leg is as a punctuation on another technique. You will see him do this a lot where he'll come in here and he'll throw like a jab and an over, and he'll punctuate his combination with a leg kick. That is a very frequent tactic. Why? Because once again, the guy's thinking about up here And now he's able to go and do an elevation change. It's a change in the pattern, change in elevation, stuff like that. This kind of a breakdown is very, very effective. It's one of the reasons that I often say that when you talk about exit strategies, you should consider doing punctuation with a roundhouse kick. Particularly a leg kick is a very nice way of doing it because you're already stepping out on this anyway. So it continues the step out motion while you're doing damage to the leg. And for a guy who's already hitting the leg a lot, it just does that much more and it adds into it. And it's constantly a thing that's being hit on these guys over and over. And you're going to see a common trend with him that once he starts hitting something, he goes back to the well and he keeps breaking them down. He's a big believer in breaking guys down over time, and it works. And we talk about his, liver shots and stuff. We'll talk about that later. He definitely does that. So that's the majority of what you're going to see from his leg kicks. And this is part of his entries into other stuff. The next part, we're going to talk about his other attacks when he's pressing forward, and then we're going to get into counter strikes, which is the fun stuff. All right, so stay tuned. Okay guys, so now I want to talk about what Edson Barboza does when he wants to start pressing the attack. Like I said, this is usually something that occurs because he's been trying to draw them into a counter and they're not taking the bait. So he's got to pressure them a little bit and give them more of a reason to start fighting back. Basically, if they're not going to come to him, he's going to come to them, catch them once, and then draw them back in. Catch them here and draw them back into his counter, which is really what he's looking for in his game. If you notice, there's a reason he moves backwards a lot in his fighting. It's because it's the luring principle, like I said. But if they're not taking the bait, he's got to move forward on them. Now, what you're going to see a lot of here is you're going to see a lot of, like I said, active feigning, where he's using a lot of stepping and probing jab. He does a lot of high guard, and he'll move into range and try to connect with that jab as often as possible. But there's some other things that he likes to do as well. Like I said, he does like to do the 1-2. It's a very common tactic. And then he'll punctuate it a lot of times with that leg kick as he steps out. That's one of the offensive combinations he likes to use. Another one that he likes to use is he likes to come in, and this is one of my favorite combos of him, is that when he decides to press forward, he's going to cover high to protect his head, drop his head down off the line, hook body, hook head, cross. He will throw this a lot, and especially that first part, that pop, pop. He will consistently land that on guys, and he'll move back. They won't take the bait. He moves it, pop, pop, and then it gets back out. That combination is a very successful combination. The third thing I want to talk about is how he pulls guys, and part of this is how he sets up his switch kick. The switch kick is a very dangerous weapon, but he doesn't use it willy-nilly. If you notice, he doesn't overuse it because he sets it up. He might throw a 1-2 to throw a switch kick, but sometimes what he does is this. He tries to pull guys to his cross. So he uses the switch kick to pull them in this direction so he can hit his cross and so he can hit the leg kick. The same thing happens in reverse. Most guys know an orthodox fighter, where's the big damage coming from? This far side of the body. So what do? They start coming in this direction. And it's very similar to the principle that when you get somebody against the cage, sometimes what you can do is from right here, I'll throw my roundhouse to pull him back in, or I'll throw my turning back kick to pull him in this direction. He does it very similar. He uses his cross and his leg kick to be a threat to force them to move to the left. His left, their right. And as they do so, thinking to escape the power, this is when he catches that liver shot with that roundhouse kick, that switch kick. And it hurts them. You will see guys, they feel it, man, because he throws it so quick and so heavy, but it's also unpredictable because he's mixing up his attacks. He's drawing them in, doing the luring principle. He comes in here, he's threatening here. He's using the opportunism principle and projected intention to catch the leg. He might move it, pop, pop. And then he comes in, and as he starts threatening his cross, then they start moving away from it, and they're not even thinking about it. And this is how he works, where he mixes it up so that guys are constantly confused by what's coming next. But that pulling guys back and forth between his power side and that switch kick, very, very useful tactic for him to keep these guys in front of him and allow him to use the luring more successfully to pull them in a lateral movement so they don't start circling around at him or changing angles a bunch. Okay? So that's his basic principle for how he attacks when he can't lure them in. Next part, we're going to talk about countering. Okay, guys, so there's two different types of counters I want to talk about with him because they're thrown in slightly different ways. One is anything that he's throwing that kicks and knees, and the other one is his punching counters. The punching counters you're going to see more often, but the kicking counters are what he's really looking for. And we'll talk about why they're set up a little bit differently. Part of it is this. When he is attacking, like I said, he's luring them in. He knows that as they come in, what are they most likely to throw is some sort of a jab cross or hand combination that tends to be more lateral. If they happen to shoot, it's okay because he's so far out. We're going to talk about that in takedowns, but he's so far out, it's hard for them to shoot from a distance. It's hard for them to kick very well against him. So what are they going to do? They're going to try to barrel in and throw a jab cross. Some variation of a straight punch. He knows this, which makes it easy to predict and makes it easy to counter. From here, he likes to use one of 4 different types of counters. It's just kind of his preference, what he's in the mood for at that moment. But generally, you'll see him switch between these 4 and kind of bounce around. He might have a preference based on a fighter, but you'll see him just kind of mix it up so that he doesn't throw the same thing over and over again. One of the things you'll see him do is as he moves back, these hands kind of cup forward, and he does this so that he's ready to parry. If the guy throws a cross, he can parry and cross, but most of the times that guy's throwing a jab, and what he likes to do is the simultaneous parry and jab. This is one of his favorite techniques, is to come in here, back off, pop, and throw that. Another thing he'll do is if he doesn't feel like he can cup his hands and sell it, sometimes he just backs up as he moves out of range, and these guys start throwing at his high guard, and he'll absorb and then throw his jab. So instead of a simultaneous pop, he'll come back here, pop, pop. So that's number 2. Number 3, what he likes to do is he likes to, as these punches are coming, drop his head off the line and throw the overhand right. He has a lot of success with that, where he comes in here, pop, and catches them. He's very powerful with it. Finally, the last thing he likes to do is he likes to do a Russian checkup, where he's going to circle out and throw that as he starts coming back. So he draws it in, he comes back, and as they come in here, he circles out and throws it. Once again, he's protecting his head because he knows that's what's at danger. So he's either going to parry, or he's going to block and jab, or he's going to drop his head off the line, or he's going to throw his head off the line as he circles back and check hooks. Those are the majority of his hand counters, and he hits these a lot. This is why he knows what's coming. So when you talk about funneling, if I can limit him to predictable motions, it makes it very easy for me to counter strike him. And this is what he's looking for. He doesn't want to get in here and bang with the guy where he doesn't know what's coming. He wants to get in here and draw them back to a predictable thing that he can then easily beat with a good hand striking. Now that's the first half of countering. The second half, we're going to talk about kicking, and it works under a little bit different principle with him, and I'll explain why in a moment. Okay guys, so when it comes to his kicking counters, they work under a very different principle than he uses for his hand striking. Hand striking is very predictable. He draws them out using the luring principle, and he throws off the line because he knows what's coming at him. When it comes to kicking, kicking is often occurring because he feels like he's getting overwhelmed. It is a trained response because one of the common things that guys like to do when he starts landing on them and backing up a lot is guys want to pressure him. He knows there's a lot of guys who are brawlers and wrestlers that when they start putting a lot of forward pressure on him and he feels like he's running a bunch, this is his trigger to throw. And you'll see guys like Terry Edom was a good example of this. He throws the wheel kick. Kevin Lee, he wobbles him. Shane Burgos catches him twice in the fight with it. And even the ones where he doesn't get knockouts on it, he still does a lot of damage. And you'll see guys that, yeah, he didn't get attributed with a KO in that fight for it, but the rest of the fight was just cleanup at that point, as that guy's wobbly and never really recovers. And what he does, like I said, is as he gets pressured back, this is his trigger to start throwing that turning wheel kick. As they start pressuring forward, he comes in with the turning wheel kick and finish him. Same thing with the turning back kick. You know, when you talk about a turning back kick finish, this is a technique that, yeah, he doesn't have a lot of KOs from it, but what he does is he sets himself up for the KO as he goes back to the well on it in a moment. And what happens is this, same principle. He comes in here as he starts getting pressured, he throws a short range turning back kick. And he generally tends to throw it more like Muay Thai style, where he kicks straight back as opposed to the Taekwondo version, because he knows he has to hit close range, as opposed to me, generally I want to get a little bit further out and draw them into a bigger kick. He knows that there's so much power in the turn that he can throw it from right here and still do a lot of damage to the liver. And what happens a lot of times is, even if he doesn't finish them, he doesn't necessarily flatten them out, but you'll see him fold a guy, and then he goes back to the well. This is when you start seeing him switch kick on the liver. This is where you start seeing him come back with that hook to the liver, because he knows that once you get him once, it's only a matter of shots before that guy's going to drop. So he'll use this to set up future finishes with other techniques. That's the real value of the turning back kick. He doesn't finish them a lot of times on this technique. He finishes them on what comes afterwards because he goes back to the well. Just like he does with the leg kick. Once he gets a little bit of success on that, he's going to keep going back to it and finish it. Same thing, turning back kick. If he catches it once, you bet your butt that the next time he engages, it's going to be attacking that liver one more time. And he's going to go back to it and go back to it. He might go away for a second, and then he's going to come and go back to that liver again because he wants to finish what he started. okay? So that's the majority of his countering using kicking. Okay, guys, so now I want to take a minute and talk about range control and the danger of this system. The guys that Edson Barboza has run into problems with are Khabib's, Justin Gaethje's, guys who put a ton of forward pressure. Now, I said most of the time, he still lands that turning back kick and turning wheel kick a whole bunch. But the thing is, sometimes he gets overwhelmed. So he does a lot of range control where he focuses on getting back out of range, throwing, and getting back out and circling. But when you look at the Khabib fight, Khabib just didn't have it. He just kept pushing forward and didn't matter what he threw at him. He just kept barreling forward. And this is a problem for a guy like Edson Barboza. So when you talk about building your system, if you're going to play this type of a game, you need to have solutions for a guy who's going to do that. Truthfully, I think the solution is more takedowns and clinches. If you have a good clinch game and you can attack from this A range as well and you can start threatening a takedown, you're going to be in good shape. Now, when you talk about guys like Justin Gaethje, man, Justin Gaethje's an All-American wrestler. Your chance of taking him down is, when you talk about Khabib, same thing, right? The world-class wrestlers are hard to do that with. So you need to have some sort of A game or A range game for the clinch game if you're going to play this kind of a system, because you know that sooner or later you're going to come across a guy who's just not going to have it and they're going to keep pressing forward. Personally, my preference is to use the front leg side kick and teeps a lot for this. Now, you'll see him throw the rear leg front kick occasionally. That's kind of a one-off, and he usually doesn't land it. I'm a big believer, if you look at the Nemean fight system, of using that front leg side kick. Now, you can do the same thing from here to throw that front leg side kick every time they start to pressure in a lot. Use that to stop their motion and then counter-strike them and get back out. That, personally, I think is an important lesson to look at when you look at Edson Barboza, because there are guys who have figured out he's great against technical strikers because they want to bang from the C range, and this is where he wants to fight from. But when you get a guy who just wants to engage and close that gap and crush you, he's run into a lot of problems. And what happens is sometimes his head starts coming back behind his feet and he gets clipped and he goes out. This has happened to him a couple times. Or he gets backed up to the cage and he can't circle out the way that he needs to, and then he gets taken down. This is a real problem for him. Now, generally speaking, his takedown defense is awesome. We'll talk about that in the next segment. But if you're going to play this kind of in and out style, you need to be prepared for what to do if somebody's just going to keep pressuring forward, and no matter what you throw at them, they're just going to keep running you down, because you can't run indefinitely. You need to be able to hold your ground. One of the best ways to do that, personally, also aside from the side kick, is to hurt them every time they come in. If he is not afraid of what's coming at him, he has no reason to not pursue. But when he is threatened by either a takedown or a devastating kick, usually a lateral kick, like a front kick up the middle as they press forward, or a side kick, these are things that give guys a moment of pause. It frustrates them and it hurts them, so they start going, I can't engage in that way. I'm never going to get the traction I need. Now, at 145, it might be easier for him because his punches carry more power. That cross is going to be a real threat, especially when you talk about throwing it down the middle, especially like a midsection punch against guys like that, and you start hitting that liver a lot. That could be a real threat as guys try to push forward. So he might have more success at a lower weight because his hands do more damage. Okay, so the next segment, we're going to talk about takedowns. All right, guys, in this section, I want to talk about takedowns and takedown defense. He does have a good takedown. I wish he used it more, because it's a really valuable tool when you have a guy who presses forward a lot, to be constantly threatened by that takedown. So when they do try to pressure forward, it creates the GSP situation, that dilemma principle, where I throw a jab and I get back out. And guys couldn't press forward on GSP because he pulled that foot back so he was ready to sprawl. And if they tried to engage, he was always ready for a reactive shot. And Edson Barboza has a good shot. He just doesn't use it that often. He uses it maybe once or twice a fight, but if he used it more, he would be more effective. I think part of it, though, is he's good on the ground. He's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, but that's not where he makes his money. He wants that fight to be standing. But I think having more of a threat in the takedown gives you a better stand-up game when they're afraid to press forward, because it's just, like I said, another threat when they start pressing it. Now, as far as takedown defense, there's a couple things that he does that work really well. First of all, I want to mention that his passive stuff works really well. The leg kick game, when you chop away at a guy's legs, it makes it very hard for him to push off of it and get to his shot. It's very challenging at that point. When you are playing the bounce in and bounce out of range game, when this guy has to shoot from this far away, it's very hard for him to finish a takedown. And it gives Edson Barboza a lot of time to respond when they do shoot, to get his underhooks and to start framing out and circling out, sprawling on him, stuff like that. And that's what he does when he actually does when the guy actually does shoot. You'll see he has a lot of time to get his underhooks. Like I said, he'll sprawl on him, he'll start circling out. Every once in a while, if you can't get that, you'll see him start working a Muay Thai plum clinch, but very rarely. Most of the time, when he's in any type of a clinch, whether it's a body clinch or a guy trying to shoot a takedown, he's looking to frame out. He wants to create space. He's going to pummel in, and he's going to get out of there because he wants to strike. That's what he does. In a way, it's a good representation of a guy who has a good jiu-jitsu game that is designed for striking. Most of his ground game is about getting back to his feet or to protect himself if he cannot be in control of the situation. Now, from the bottom, mostly what you'll see is from a bottom side, bottom mount. He's very good at recovering to a half guard, and he starts pulling down on their head, overhooking, and controlling their posture to make it difficult for them to attack him. Now, he has some leg lock game and stuff like that, and he'll recover to a closed guard, and you'll see him threaten stuff like, triangles and stuff like that once in a while, but mostly what he's trying to do is from a closed guard, he's trying to put feet on hips, push this guy back, and get back to his feet, or start kicking up to the face, get back to his feet. Threaten a triangle or an arm bar to create a posture up so that it gives him time to move his hips out and get away from this guy. It's a very common tactic of his. I talked about guys like Charles Oliveira who are really good at this. This is a very good MMA style of guard where you use your feet to get back to your feet. And that's essentially what Edson Barboza does. Now, when he gets on top, like I said, he does occasionally get his takedown. His success rate is probably pretty high on it. He does finish a lot of his takedowns. He just doesn't go for them a lot. And when he does go for them, a lot of times he tends to sit in close guard sometimes, but what he's really looking for is to posture up and throw some bombs to win some points. But he's not really looking to finish fights from there. Most of the time, if he's finishing a fight from a ground and pound situation, it's because he already clipped this guy really hard and they've dropped and he's just cleaning up. But a lot of times, if he does get a takedown, you will see him stack and throwing bombs. It's a very common tactic of his. So that's it for the takedowns and jiu-jitsu side of it. I didn't want to spend a ton of time of it because that's not the majority of his game. He's good at it. I don't think he's one of the best in MMA. He's okay. He has enough for what he does, but really his goal is to use jiu-jitsu and use takedown defense to keep him on his feet. But it's important if you're going to be a striker to look at the things he does that are very good passive stuff as well. The leg kicks, creating range, stuff like that. That all helps to make it easier to defend. And then when he does get taken down, he has the skill sets to get back to his feet. And I'll be honest, the one thing I'll give him credit for, though, is he's had some guys put him in some really bad positions that he has slowly wormed his way out of some chokes and stuff like that. We look at the Cowboy Cerrone fight, there wasn't much he could do. He got clipped, and Cowboy was just on him, right? Khabib, well, it's Khabib. And Khabib didn't finish him with that. He ended up winning going on and finishing. Khabib won by decision. So Khabib had the choke and he still got out. And this is what I'm saying, his ability to escape chokes and bad situations on the ground is very good. And he has taken some real beatings on the ground and gotten back up. And in the next round, I like the Kevin Lee fight as an example. He gets beat up, he gets beat up, he gets beat up, and then finally, catches that wheel kick. And you see this going on, right? And you're like, whoa, this fight's over. And it just happened to not be, but it makes him a threat when at any point he can switch it up and throw something that can finish a fight. Very much like a Derek Lewis where, Derek Lewis, huffing and puffing, you're like, oh, he got caught in the liver, and then bam, he throws an overhand. You're like, whoa, that guy could end a fight at any moment. And that's how Edson Barboza is. There's been fights where he gets beat up a lot in the first round, and then he comes back and he cleans their clock because he kicks so hard, and every time he throws, it's with 100% power, and it makes him a scary dude. All right, guys, so that's it for Edson Barboza. Really a fantastic striker. I've had a lot of fun putting stuff together on him. I watched a ton of his fights. Unfortunately, he has a lot of content for me to watch, which makes it easy for me to do. But I hope they enjoyed this. As always, smash the subscribe button. If there's a fighter that you want to see a breakdown, and make sure you throw it below. If there's things that you want to add to this, make sure you throw it in the comments below as well. I have fun doing this and engaging in conversations about this as well. Thanks for watching.